Hello, it's Toaster Party, and today I'm going to talk about my picks for the top 5 best mono black Planeswalkers in Modern. But without further ado, let's get into the list. Start off with number 5, Liliana, the Waker of the Dead. This card's essentially a worse Liliana of the Veil. But the one upside is that its +1 ability can do an impersonation of the card the Rack, because after your opponent runs out of cards, they start taking 3 damage each time you use the +1. The -3 is a little bit worse because if your opponent is playing some form of graveyard hate, it just doesn't work. And an Edict is a little bit better than targeted -X, where X is the number of the creatures in your graveyard. But it's overall still a pretty decent card. Let's move on to number 4, Soarin, Imperious Bloodlord. This is a very strong payoff for Vampire Tribal, as it can cheat vampires into play with its -3, which there's a lot of pretty powerful ones that you can put into play really quickly. Another thing is that both of its +1s are also really good, because the first one gives target creature you control Death Touch lifelink, and if it's a vampire, you get a +1/+1 counter on it, and the other one turns a vampire into a lightning helix. So, very powerful card, just stuck in a very bad deck. So let's move on to number 3, Liliana, the Last Hope. This is a pretty powerful card that's very good at dealing with small creatures, as its +1 gives a target creature -2/-1 until your next turn. So there's a lot of 1 toughness creatures in the format right now, such as Ragavan, DRC before it gets Delirium, and various other things. And being able to deal with them is pretty good, and being able to repeatedly is also very good. It also is a low-cost advantage engine because its -2 lets you mill 2 cards from your deck and then put a creature from your graveyard back to hand. And the final ability, its ultimate, is very good at closing out a game. Let's move on to number 2, Soarin the Mirthless. This card is a really generically good card. It's a decent advantage engine with its +1 basically being Dark Confidant, but it's also quite a bit harder to remove than Dark Confidant. And the other upside is that you can also choose to not reveal the card and keep it back on top of your deck so you don't lose the life in case the card is too big. Another thing is, that's probably the best part of this card aside from being an advantage engine, is the -2 ability where you make a 2/3 black vampire token with both flying and lifelink. That's a pretty good token, and if you can make more than one of these, it shouldn't be too hard to be able to close a game from there. It's also just a generically good card that you could put in a variety of decks and not limited to a specific deck type. But let's move on to the obvious number 1, Liliana of the Veil. The most expensive card in Modern right now. And for good reason. This card can get an opponent empty-handed really quickly with repeated uses of the +1 ability. It also has a very built-in strong removal effect of target player gets edicted. And the ultimate on this card is pretty good at being able to end a game, because you just force your opponent to either sack one half of their board or the other half, keeping them off certain lands, or keeping them off all of their creatures or all of their lands. It's a very powerful card, and we'll still see play at Modern for years to come. Well, that's all I had to say. Thanks for watching. Hope you leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope you all have an excellent day.